The main character is a pretty and graceful Nida. She sells DVDs of questionable content and origin on a market. She already has a clientele and Dom is one of such clients. He works in television and tries to find an interesting topic for a mystical talk show that could satisfy his picky boss. Nida and Dom are friends. Once, she invites him over. Nida's flat has a lot of stuffed animals because her deceased husband was a zoologist. Dom finds out that Nida has a 17-year-old son, Ton. He hasn't left his room in 5 years. He and Nida fought over something minor, and the son, threatening with suicide, forbade his mother to enter. Ever since then, Nida has put his favorite magazines under the door and left the food by the door before going to work. The window of Tom's room is covered from inside with scraps of newspapers. A strange bony silhouette is occasionally seen from there, and neighbors say that from time to time, they see Ton out in the street at night. Nida has attended Professor Suni's classes for many years now. She teaches the development of one's mental energy using mediation. Nida's success in this is significant. She is blindfolded during one of the lessons, and she cuts a pencil with a sheet of paper after Professor Suni explains that it is a bamboo stalk and a sharp knife. Sometimes, Nida has strange visions in the classroom, but despite this she piously trusts her teacher and gives out pamphlets, advertising her classes to all her acquaintances. A young girl named Pan lives with her mother across from Nida. Pan has been allergic since childhood, and so she never leaves the house because of the constant attacks. No one knows the cause of the disease, but her mother spends huge amounts of money on doctors and healers, hoping to cure her daughter. The mother has been divorced for a long time, and she actively dates men, frequently being absent from home. The girl is worried because of this, though she tells mom she is happy she won't remain alone after she is gone. Pan doesn't believe she can be cured and plans her suicide. We see how she leaves a suicide note and intends to cut her veins, but the noise in a guy's corpse, that falling onto a car, stop her. Dom is very interested in Tun's story. He seeks out information and finds out that hikikomori syndrome has become more frequent among adolescents. It is a complete unwillingness to have any social contacts. The kids sleep during the day, stay awake during the night, don't go to school, don't see the sun. This is a severe case of sociopathy. He writes a screenplay of the show and suggests it to the director, but he isn't very curious. He doesn't believe that this can interest the audience. However, he suggests to talk to this lad first. Dom goes to see Nida and tells her about the syndrome. He explains that a mother is an important part of this syndrome, since she provides care and feeds, so the kid has no need to leave their isolated world. Nida is irritated. It was his decision to lock himself up. But Dom insists that she encourages him to live like this. They have to try to bring him out of that room. Nida and Dom come up to Tom's room. "Do not enter" is scratched on the door, but it is silent behind the door. Then a note appears, written in blood on a piece of a newspaper. "Leave me alone." Nida and Dom are worried. They try to convince him to open the door, but the second note appears, covered in blood. "If you don't leave me alone, I will kill myself." Nida is horrified, and a severed child's finger appears under the door. Nida tells Dom to leave, but Dom doesn't move away from the door and insists, "Open the door, I just want to talk." Nida tries to pull him aside and Dom, trying to free himself, accidentally pushes her down the stairs. He wants to run after Nida, but someone pushes him. He falls and someone steps on his leg. The crunch of bones is heard. "Who are you?" Dom screams out in horror. A large knife soars into the air. Blow after blow. Splashes of blood flood the wall. Dom's screaming disappears. It is night. Drops of blood fall onto Nida's sleeping face. She awakes. She sees that the door is open. Ton appears with a towel wrapped around his head and a knife in his hand. "Ton, you've left the room?" She is filled with joy. Nida uncovers his face and freezes in horror. She shudders and wakes up. It was a dream. Pan looks out the window. Their neighbor was robbed, and the police have arrived. Her mother enters and says that it is time to get going. They will go to see a doctor. On their way there, Pan hungrily looks at the city streets and people. There is a mask on her face. The girl remembers herself at school, sitting next to little Ton, and how they were telling each other about their allergies. Ton says that he is allergic to his mother. She shouts at him all the time, and he wants to be with his dad. Nida is in a class with Professor Suni. She tells a story about a boy who got into a car accident and went through a sex reassignment surgery. He was treated with hypnosis, and so he believed his whole life that he was a woman. He married, gave birth to 2 kids. But memory partially started to return. The man realized who he really was but couldn't come to terms with it. He killed himself. But what's the most mysterious thing is that after his death, his kids died as well, and turned into dust. According to Suni, this illustrated limitless possibilities of mental energy. Nida is very tense when listening to this story. Pan and her mother return from the doctor. No results again. The girl is upset, and she doesn't notice a motorcyclist rushing towards her when she gets out of a car. Nida gets there in time, saving her from the blow, and then talks to her mom. Nida gives her the brochure, advertising Professor Sunni's lessons. She is certain this might help Pan. The mother thanks her, but when she enters the house, she becomes angry with Nida for inviting her to the sect again. When the mother goes on another date, Pan reads Nida's brochure. A cat appears by a window. Despite an allergic attack, the girl feeds it. This is when she sees Nida and invites her over. Pan says that she's read the brochure and she has questions now. Nida assures her she is the only one who can make herself happy. Nida asks Pan to close her eyes and have a hypnosis session with her. When the girl awakes, she feels some changes. You need to believe that you are a healthy person, Nida explains. The girl is grateful. She sees Nida off and asks why Tun has covered the windows with newspapers. He likes it that way, she answers, and her facial expression changes. Nida is in a class once again, but she finds it difficult to concentrate. She sees the door of her son's room and the scrawled inscription, "Do not enter," and then a note on a piece of newspaper. "I'm not your son." She jumps up and runs out of the room. She remembers an episode from the past. She is very irritated and fights with her husband, trying to find out where he was. He assures her he was away on business, but having looked at his camera, Nida sees a photo of him with a different woman. She shouts at him and hits him. He tries to calm her down, but, unable to withstand it, he throws Nida onto the floor and kicks her in the stomach. Tun watches this through the floorboards of his room. The husband screams that he is leaving her and says goodbye to Tun. Nida grabs a gun and aims at her husband. "Our son wants us to be together." The memories are interrupted. Nida is in tears. Pan pokes around in the drawer and finds medical bills. She also takes out a letter in an envelope from there. This is a notice of her mother's dismissal. The girl is shocked. A group of guys are talking in the street. The conversation turns to Tun. One of the guys assumes that Tun has left with his father, but the others argue that the father left them after he got a mistress. It is unlikely he took his son with him. What is more, Tun is sometimes seen outside during the night. One of them decides to find out all the details about Tun. We then see again how Pan is preparing to kill herself. She is tired of being a burden to her mother. This same scene was already seen at the very beginning of the film, but we can now see what happens in parallel with these events. The lad, who wants to find out more about Tun, climbs onto the attic and makes his way through the flimsy ceiling towards Nida's flat. Nida is in her shop. She crawls under the table to reach for a disc. She sees her husband there, angrily shouting to her, "Return my son to me." Nina runs away in horror. The customers surprisingly look under the table but see nothing there. Pan writes a suicide note. Terrible thunder is outside. The neighbor, who has been robbed recently, is sitting on a couch with a gun, listening carefully to the noise outside. The lad, having reached Tun's room, lifts the panel of the ceiling and tries to take a photo. In the meantime, Pan looks at her reflection on the blade of a knife. The guy fails to get the first image and tries to take a new one. He sees something on it that scares him. He wants to run away, but the attic floors break under him, and he falls. He gets up and intends to climb over the fence when the neighbor thinks it is another thief and shoots him. The lad falls onto the roof of a car. Pan hears the noise and moves the knife away from her veins, looking out of the window in horror. Nida drives back home in a taxi. Meanwhile, Pan sees the cat in the yard with a bag on her head. She can't get out, screaming plaintively. Pan approaches the front door and has an attack, but hears Nida's voice in her head. "You have to believe you are a healthy person." She comes outside. She calls the cat, but it runs towards Nida's house. The gate is closed and Pan climbs over the fence. The door opens and the cat with the bag on its head runs into the house. The girl cautiously follows it. She finds the cat on the stairs that lead to Tun's room. Pan removes the bag from its head when one panel falls from the ceiling. Pan trembles with fear and looks into the hole. Up in the attic, she sees Dom's body wrapped in film. The girl is terrified and wants to run downstairs, but someone opens the front door. Nida rushes into the apartment. It is clear that she is hiding from someone. The door opens again. Her husband appears on the doorstep. "What are you doing here? You are dead." Nida screams. "I'm alive," he replies. "It is our son who is dead. When will you come to terms with this?" We see some scenes from the past. Nida shouts to her husband that their son wants them to be together. Her husband asks her to put down the gun. Tun lies on the floor, watching everything that happens through the gap between the boards. The husband tries to snatch the gun from Nida's hands, but the barrel is pointing up. A shot is heard. Both of them freeze, staring at the ceiling in horror. Blood starts to drip onto Nida's cheek. Tun lies in his room in a pool of blood with a shot through his head. The parents rush into Tun's room. Nida screams out wildly, rushing to her murdered son's body. Nida tries to prove to her husband that Tun is alive. He is in his room. He just doesn't come out. "There is no one in there," her husband says. Pan realizes that they might see her and hides in the bathroom. "You hear that?" Nida yells, when hearing some noise. "He is in there." The husband walks up the stairs, fully determined, and enters Tun's room, despite Nida's protests. A creature, looking like a half-decayed corpse, sits at the computer. "You see? It is all good. Nida smiles. She sees her son. The man looks at the creature in horror. What would you like for dinner, son? Nida asks with a smile. The creature gets up and approaches the door. Nida cuts her husband's throat with a huge knife. Pan watches this, terrified. The husband pushes Nida down the stairs, dying. She falls. She lies in a pool of blood, looks at her son, who walks towards her, smiling. Nida is happy. Pan starts to have an allergy attack. She covers her mouth with her hand, opens the door quietly, comes out, and she sees a creature, bending over Nida. She starts to scream wildly and tries to run away, but it follows her. Pan escapes through a gap in the ceiling, and the creature punches through the ceiling, trying to grab her. The girl hides in a corner, while the monster violently destroys the ceiling. It collapses, the girl falls, grabs some rope, and hangs on it over the stairs. The creature appears in front of her with an iron stake in its hands. But then some sharp fragment from the ceiling pierces Nida through her chest. Her eyes close. The creature slowly crumbles to dust. Some time has passed since then. Professor Suni talks about opening up inner possibilities. Pan is standing on the stage, blindfolded. Her mother is among the rest in the audience, watching her closely. Suni gives the girl a pencil and a piece of paper, saying that this is a bamboo shoot and a sharp knife. With a single motion, Pan cuts the pencil using the paper. Everyone applauds Pan and her mother looks at her proudly. Such is the power of a person's faith, says Professor Suni. Here's a corridor of a mental hospital. A doctor explains to the students, here's another difficult case in front of you. It might be too late if you don't start the treatment on time. They pass by the door and there is Nida behind it, sitting on the floor. She continues to live in her illusions. A note appears under her door, saying, I love you, Mom. Nida smiles happily, clutching the note to her chest.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and share.